Welcome to the NSI podcast, where technology, innovation, and strategy come together to empower today's IT leaders. Today, the NSI Cybersecurity team chat with Jon Green, CTO and CSO at HPE Aruba. They get into how hybrid work is changing network security, what people get wrong about zero trust, and how AI is reshaping the cybersecurity game. Jon's been with Aruba for over 20 years, so he's seen it all. And he even shares how his love for flying planes connects to managing complex networks.
All right, Jon, thank you so much for being on the show today. How you been doing?
Awesome. Excellent.
Awesome. Well, I know a lot's happened this year for HPE, but we're going to talk a lot about cybersecurity, and we're going to talk a lot about kind of where you came from in IT and how you got to where you are today. But first and foremost, I want to introduce, we have Dr. David O'Gwen on with us as well as Gene Patrick. They're both from the Next Step Innovation Enterprise Cybersecurity team. And then Jon, we'll just kind of jump into it. And I know that you are you used to work, I guess it was called Aruba Networks, right?
Yep.
Which the name's gone through a lot of iterations now, but I think you were employee number 39. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. 2003.
That is nuts. Just kind of, what is one high and one low during your journey from being the product manager in a $12 million company to becoming the CTO and CSO of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time. When I joined Aruba in 2003, I knew Kirti, the founder. I'd worked for him before that at Nortel. So I called him up in earlier that year and I said, "Hey, what's this Aruba thing? What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, do you want to come do QA?" And I said, "Not really." And he said, "Call back in 6 months." And so I called back in 6 months. He said, "Oh yeah, I got something for you." So it was kind of a technical marketing engineer / built the first training program, picked up product management, did a bunch of marketing stuff. It is startups like that. You just do whatever needs to get done. And so that was the early days. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. And you guys work for small companies. It's just a ton of. There's nobody else you can give it to. If it's got to get done, you got to do it. So we did everything from the manufacturing line of having to go swap out radio chips in Wi-Fi access points illegally, I think, unfortunately, but we didn't get caught. All the way up to just whatever needed to get done. I'd say the high point in that the IPO in, I think that was 2006 or 7. We went public and had no idea if we'd survive. I mean, those early years, you really don't know if your next paycheck's going to show up. But going public and having stock be worth something, that's probably one of the highs financially anyway. But it's also kind of exciting. The financial crisis hitting right after that might have been the low, because the stock price ended up below $1 for just a brief period. And
that's scary.
Sort of like, oh yeah, what's going on? So that might have been a low. There's been so many over the 23 years that it's been, or 22. Getting acquired by HP was, that was both highs and lows. And honestly, a lot of us weren't super excited about that in 2015 when that got announced, just because of where HP had been before that in Silicon Valley. You saw scandals with board members, and you saw just round after round of layoffs, and it was kind of a scary thing for us. And fortunately, I think we joined at a good time. Number one, they split the company apart into HPE and HP and a bunch of other companies. But Antonio Neri became our CEO, and I think I didn't expect to stay as long as I have, and I'm still here, and it's 10 years later. So I've been really happy with that. So that was kind of a low that turned into a high at that point.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually worked for HPE, which then became HPE. And I was on the networking side. So I was actually on the opposite side when that acquisition happened. And, just we were feeling the same thing, because everyone's like, hey, this is a reverse acquisition. And we're all like, well, what's that even mean? I don't even know what that means. So yeah, it was a lot of fear and trepidation there. But yeah, I think we all came out of that on top, quite honestly. So,
and I think the winners in it were really our customers, and
agreed.
the ability to combine Aruba technology into the sales and delivery and support machine of HPE. We wouldn't have run customers like Home Depot and some of these really, really big worldwide global deployments as an independent company. With you needed to be part of a big parent company for that.
Well, one of the things that you were saying, and first let me say thank you for coming on. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. But something that you said before we started recording was that you had flown the plane to where you are right now, which is flown the plane is quite a statement to make. I'm wondering how long you've been flying.
I started flying airplanes in 1996. That was about the year I had enough money that I could actually go through the training and complete it, working for Bay Networks back in those days. So Des Moines, Iowa, I did my initial training and got my private pilot's license out there, and then moved to California, did a whole bunch more, the commercial, the multi-engine, the seaplane was up in Seattle. And then in 2019, 2020, became a flight instructor. So it's been a bunch of stuff.
Right on. Well, it's something that something I was curious about is that do you find, well, for starters, to have flown that long, you have to have a passion for it, right? To have been involved in that craft and that hobby and that space, that's a difficult proposition. But I'm curious, do you find that there's any overlap between the process of flying a plane safely day after day and the process of securing complex networks, right? Do those two things feel like very different things, or is there a similarity between the two?
I think there's some similarity in the term I'd probably use is systems thinking. The airplane, all sorts of things can go wrong with it, and unlike a car, you can't just pull over to the side of the road and hop out. It can be quite serious if something goes wrong in the air. Just today, flying to Ohio, where I am now, the screen started blinking at me at one point saying, cylinder head temperature too high. And there's a number of things that can cause that to happen, not enough airflow, the fuel mixture being wrong, stuff like that. But being able to visualize, I think in my head, this is how the engine works. Here's the path that the air takes. Here's the path the fuel takes. What are the causes of this thing, and what do I do about it? And that extends to all kinds of things. Any kind of erroneous or error message that shows up on the screen, or just any kind of noises that you're hearing, or things that don't seem right. Having an understanding of how that machine is built is really, really important in order to do the right thing and to not do the wrong thing. And so you can always, say, well, I'll just go land the airplane and we'll figure it out. But you'll waste an awful lot of time if that's the response to anything unusual. And, similar thing in networking and cybersecurity. If you don't understand the system that you're operating in, it's going to send you down all kinds of wrong pathways. A link went down, between two sites, or between, two closets, and you say, well, is it spanning tree? Oh no, it's a EVPN overlay. And so the problem is a routing problem in BGP, for example. Like, you can go down completely the wrong pathway. And I've done it over and over and over again. Shocking the number of times it's a physical layer problem, and it's like the cable wasn't plugged in all the way, or it was on the wrong port and I didn't bother to notice. But in cybersecurity, that becomes there's time constraints there and time boundaries, and you're trying to solve a problem quickly. And if you don't have that systems view of how the whole thing's put together, you're just likely to go down kind of random pathways. And we don't say this much in 2025 anymore, but like in 2010, if you got attacked, people would say, oh, I'm going to pull the internet connection and just shut the whole thing down. Well, we can't do that, right? So And that's kind of analogous to, oh, I'll just land the airplane for any sort of anomaly that takes place. So I think that's one. The other place that there could be some crossover is the use of checklists. In aviation, we've used checklists forever, just because their memory is fallible, and people forget to do things. And you've seen other professions kind of pick up that idea of checklists. Medicine is one of them, and surgeons are now using kind of very simple checklists to say, did I do this thing? Did I remember to do this thing? What happens over here? We do that a little bit in cybersecurity. They're sort of like validated reference designs, or you remember the Microsoft tool that would go and scan your Windows server and tell you all the best practices that you had violated. But those are actually really helpful things for getting a system into a state that, you know it to be secure enough, I guess, but you haven't forgotten some major thing that like, oh, I left the firewall turned off, or I left the SSH port open to the internet and I didn't mean to. So I think there's probably some things we can learn back and forth.
That's great.
I think that dovetails really well into the whole over the last 20 years you've been at HPE, you've seen a lot of the different sides of how things have grown, especially within enterprise networks. Even within the last 5-ish years since COVID, things have changed so drastically with AI integration, remote work, things like that. Specifically moving into the remote work, as we see that more and more often, is that changing the way that you guys are thinking about network security as a whole philosophically? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for me, it changes it in a big way. And so if I look at 10 years ago, we were primarily the office network, right? If you go into your office or you go into a college campus or wherever you see our stuff deployed, we're providing that network. And so we're doing a certain amount of security around that, whether it's segmentation or detecting IoT devices and trying to make sure that they get the appropriate treatment in the network and so forth. And then when you went home and were a teleworker or a VPN type of user, you had a completely different sort of layer that you were going through from a security standpoint. And it was probably different people in an IT organization that were controlling those things. And so we just sort of got used to it. And one of the things we did in kind of the pre-zero trust thinking world was, well, all my resources are in my corporate environment. And so the job is the VPN gets me back into that same environment, and then I can do all the things that I'm used to doing. And obviously today with hybrid cloud and just cloud in general, and with the idea of zero trust, a lot of that goes away. But we see people saying, why should I have a different security layer for the office network versus outside the office network? It's the same threats, really, and it's the same sorts of it's the same people that move back and forth between the two. Can't we find a way to unify these things? And so that in part drove kind of our acquisition of a company called Access Security a couple of years ago, this SSE space, and saying, well, we think that the center of gravity for user-based policy is probably in that SSE layer, or we'll call it ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access or Architecture, whatever word we want to pick. And maybe the center of gravity for the things that are on your network is the network itself. And that's not to say there's no crossover between those things, but I think that conceptually makes some sense. And that's leading to, Gartner coined this term universal ZTNA. If you say that to Forrester, they'll laugh and say, ZTNA we made that up and it was always about this idea of universal. But it's the notion that it doesn't matter if I'm on net or off net. We eliminate that distinction and we say the cloud and the enforcement capability that lives in the cloud, or it could be on-prem, is consistent. It doesn't matter if I'm inside the building or outside the building. I'm going to get my traffic to those types of enforcement nodes, and that's where I'm going to apply policy. So I think that's the biggest outcome of probably the remote access is we have to stop thinking of it as remote access. It's just, I'm a user that's an HPE employee. I need access to some corporate system, and really shouldn't matter if I'm inside the four walls of the building or sitting at home or sitting in a hotel in Columbus, Ohio right now. I need to do the same things. And from a security perspective, I think we can make things a lot better by looking at it that way, and not kind of saying, oh, remote access is some totally different thing.
Okay, so you're going from concentric rings of security, your outside perimeter, your remote users, and then your internal, and you're kind of merging them all together. That makes sense.
And that's kind of the idea of Gartner coined this term SASE, Secure Access Services Edge, and that it kind of gets to that idea as well. Is if 50% of my applications live in the cloud, it doesn't really make sense to backhaul a bunch of network traffic back to my headquarters site or to my data center site, and then put it through some security process and then ship it back out to the internet. Instead, why don't we let it go direct and put the security in the cloud? And so you've seen companies like Zscaler and Netscope and Palo and us with Axis building up to support those sorts of things. I think the other benefit besides consistent security is it's a more consistent experience for the end user. I don't have to think about firing up a VPN client anymore. I don't really worry about it. There's a piece of software on this laptop that automatically connects me to the things I need, whether that's internal or external. And I just don't worry about it.
That makes sense.
So going back to something that you said earlier, which I thought was really excellent, was that the importance of having a proper mental model to be able to understand when things go wrong. How do you think that let's just say that we enter into a fully SASE world, a fully zero trust world. What are the transitions that security professionals are going to have to do? The transitions in their mental model, because right now, IT security is very much defense in depth, right?
Yeah.
They think of a hardened shell and everything inside. How do you think the zero trust is going to affect that mental model? What do you see the transition looking like?
It makes it a lot worse in some ways for people, in the sense that if I do outsource my policy enforcement to an SSE provider, that's a black box to me as a security professional. I can kind of, I'll have a login to it. I can kind of see, well, here's my users, that sort of, but I don't know how the thing works. Is it some multi-tenant VM? Is it a per tenant type of VM in the cloud, or is it, where is it? We don't know. And so a lot of the troubleshooting that we might have to do starts to turn into, how do I isolate that system and say, is it Zscaler or is it not Zscaler? And I go through this process sometimes of, I got to shut off Zscaler or pull up a second laptop that's not hooked up to that and say, is the problem still occurring with that? So box isolation is kind of the name of the game there, not physical box, but kind of box in my network diagram. So in some ways, especially for kind of highly technical people, it makes the problem worse because I don't have a place I can go and see the details of what's actually going on. I just have to treat it as a bunch of black boxes. And some people are not super comfortable with that. Others say, the workload saved by making it someone else's problem is no different than any other software as a service sort of problem. We're like, the world's dependent on Microsoft now to run Office 365, and if they don't do their job, we're all kind of screwed. So I think it's that same calculus that we have to go through. The other way to answer, though, is if you look at your local network and the ability to have observability within that and to know what people are doing, that starts to go away as well when all we're doing is shipping tunneled traffic around the network, which is hitting some egress point. So in some ways, we've already have that because encryption's come into play so much. Everything's TLS encrypted now, and so you already can't see into the traffic, but you may have a hope of detecting what something is, even if you can't see the details in it. The tunneling idea with SSE and ZTNA kind of makes that problem a little bit worse. You just have to know what are my points of access where I can go and actually get that level of detail. And it may not be the local network. It may not be the local firewall anymore. It may be somewhere else.
So I want to shift gears real quick and talk a little bit about some of your volunteer work at DEF CON. So I guess, my first my first question is, how long have you been volunteering at DEF CON?
That's a good question. All those years run together. We just got back from the last one a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I think it's 8 years for the NOC, the Network Operations Center,
Okay.
and I think it's 3 years for the Call for Papers Review Committee. I've been going for much longer. I've been going since I think DEF CON 12. I feel like that was 2005 or roughly thereabouts. It was a very different conference back
A couple
then.
years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago. But yeah, a guy that is in my company who actually works for me was the lead for the NOC for a while. So I would stop by and just say, "Hey, what's up?" And they'd say, "Well, we're running Aruba Wi-Fi here, and we need a firmware update. Can you help us?" "Oh yeah, I can help that." And hey, we need to understand these wireless IDS settings. Can you help? And so I was kind of friendly with that team for a few years, but then at some point they said, "Hey, do you want to be part of the team and focus on Wi-Fi?" So. That was a while ago.
Yeah. So, of all the villages there, which one do you either recommend people to visit, or like when you go there, you're like, yeah, these are my people. I like these folks right here.
Yeah, they all have something to offer, and the other thing is there's new ones every year, so you kind of have to find who your people are and what interests you. And this year and last year, being in the Las Vegas Convention Center, they got lots of extra space that we never had before. And so you saw new villages and new kind of communities popping up and some very niche interests. And you kind of look at it and say, what's that? But there's like 10 people that want to talk about that topic. So that's cool. I would have to say it used to be called the Wireless Village. Now they call it the Radio Frequency Village, I think is the official name. We've sponsored them for a long time, and it's really cool stuff. If you're in the wireless domain and you think that everything is happy and secure, they'll wake you up very quickly to kind of like stuff that can go wrong in that world. And it's not so much Wi-Fi. Like they were once called the Wi-Fi Village, I think, and that was sort of too limiting. They've just expanded to kind of all things that transmit and receive since then. So you find things in there you're the SIGINT mission that like the intelligence agencies do to capture random satellite signals. There are people that will be at this RF village that are of equal skills, and I see a signal out there. I want to know what the signal is, and they will go through all this crazy stuff and turn it into a working signal at the end of the day. So it's really just impressive stuff. Not to take away from any of the other places, but that's the one I tend to visit, every single year that I go by. And they complain about my Wi-Fi, so.
Fair enough, right? But the last question I have kind of on that topic, and you guys can ask some more questions if you'd like, is it is in Vegas, as many of our conferences are in. So when you think back in all those years, what was one of the craziest moments, whether it was just something that happened at the conference or just a fun memory you have from going to those conferences and in Las Vegas?
Yeah, the amount of craziness of that conference has declined over the years, probably for the better, or we wouldn't be having it anymore because sort of Vegas wised up to these DEF CON guys. But the early years was a bit crazy at the Alexis Park. And, first thing I did was walk in and see the hot tubs overflowing with bubbles that somebody had put in it and stuff. But I think probably the craziest thing I've seen was the fire that happened on the outside of the Riviera Hotel.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was down in the parking lot. The fire alarm went off. They evacuated the place. So I was in the parking lot looking up, and the side of the building was on fire on the outside of the building. Very small. And it was taken care of quickly. It wasn't the building itself burning. It was on the out. And I didn't know for a long time what happened. And then I came across this guy, and he seems to know all the stories, but he was in the room, and he said somebody had shipped in a big box of rubber snakes, and they opened it up to do some, I don't know, who knows what they're going to do with it. And somebody else in the room says, that smells flammable. And so one of them grabbed a rubber snake out of the box, lit it on fire just to see if it was going to burn, didn't expect the reaction that happened, and he dropped it. And he dropped it back into the box of the other rubber snakes, which then caught on fire. So another guy in the room picks up a floor lamp and somehow like levers the the burning mess of rubber snakes and goes out to the balcony and somehow like tried to wing it over the side, and instead it like kind of flew around and stuck to the side of the building and kept on burning. And it just like
The comedy of errors
from downstairs. But it was years later before I had kind of and I probably got that story wrong a little bit because, game of telephone. But yeah, there was a big change maybe 10 years ago where they kind of said, we are going to get kicked out and never allowed to come back and get together again if we don't stop some of this stuff. So it's somewhat less fun and less weird like that, but probably quite a bit safer than it used to be. But the great thing about that conference is the people that come for the first time, and every year it's like at least 40% of the people are brand new for the first time.
Sure.
And some of them come like expecting a corporate conference or like a Black Hat. They come from Black Hat and they think this is just a continuation of Black Hat. And it's completely not. It's not even one conference. It's like 27 conferences all co-located. And there's something for everyone there. But people are intimidated by that because it is difficult to just walk into a group of people that know each other and try to see what's going on. So it can be weird in that way. But I've seen so many people, especially younger people, that just get inspired over stuff they saw some random person do at DEF CON or show off or say, on a main stage talk. This is what I spent the last year working on, and this is kind of cool. And the crowd goes insane for it. And 6 other people are in that room and they say, oh, maybe I should go try to do something like this and
Right.
make the world a better place. So that's what I get out of that place.
So one question I've got is that there's been stories that there was a story recently in the security world about bug bounties, the leaderboards being taken over by, or at least topped out by teams using AI, and there was, I believe, there was also a DARPA challenge that was at DEF CON 2025. Having to do with essentially identification of software vulnerabilities. I haven't read the story on it, but to first order, it looks like it's a combination of static analysis and maybe some dynamic analysis of web applications. But when I first read that story, my immediate reaction, at least to the bug bounty story, for example, and I suppose this as well, is that there is it seems to me that it's giving a bit more importance to AI in the security space than perhaps it should, largely because AI, I would think, my instincts tell me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, AI is going to be very good at finding lots of small things very quickly, right? Much faster than a human could, that any team of humans could, at whatever scaling you like. And that's largely the reason for it. Now, do you believe that is the case currently, that this is really sort of masking the so-called AI supremacy in security right now that everyone talks about? It's masking some larger problems with AI as a whole, or do you believe that they are in fact onto something and we're seeing sort of the future of security?
It's a really good question. And at DEF CON probably 6-7 years ago, they had the first of the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge, where they kind of took 6 AI systems and said, you all hack each other and try to keep your own. It was a capture the flag competition, basically. A lot of stuff was learned from that was brought back this past year. I think there was another talk at DEF CON, and it's actually been posted on YouTube now. I wish I could remember the keywords to search for, but it was basically about, they used, I think, Anthropic Claude to come in and basically participate in capture the flag competitions. And it was more or less a prompting type of exercise of saying, hey, Claude, you are a world-class CTF competitor, and this is the task, and you need to do these things. And it was a for the purposes of kind of figuring out what is it good at, what is it not good at. And it was really good at some of the basic stuff, and it did it really, really quickly. And you have to look at that and say, okay, that's a CTF exercise. It's designed to be a game. It's not designed to be an impenetrable fortress. Probably we use a lot of the same things in CTFs over and over again, at least to warm people up for some of these things. And you might expect that an AI, that a large language model anyway, is going to be good at those things. It wasn't as good as the human competitors on some of the more advanced stuff, and they had some various, diving into kind of the reasoning that the model was going through. Sometimes if you didn't have enough guardrails around it, it really went off the deep end, like got into metaphysical stuff and the nature of the universe and how many dimensions are there and do aliens exist, like crazy. I don't know how it ended up on that pathway, but it didn't complete the capture the flag task at that point.
It did convert some people to a cult, though, right? So.
Probably so. Yeah. Probably so.
It won a different challenge.
One of the other things that they showed in there was that there was a thing you SSH into some box, and the very first screen you see is an ASCII fish tank. It's ASCII characters like moving across the screen, looking like fish swimming in an aquarium. That sent the LLM for a complete loop. It filled its context, first of all, with just these random characters, and it's trying to interpret what is this thing. It can't look at it and say, oh, that somebody made an ASCII fish tank. So there is stuff that these things are not good at. Where I think, the AI is going to play a lot. If I look at our bug bounty program, for example, a lot of people download the firmware images and then run them in some type of emulator to try to do fuzzing against, very specific process things. And that's tedious work. And it's not necessarily a thing where AI has to be involved, but I think there's optimizations you can make there if you put kind of a reasoning model in charge of that. Likewise, we've seen where you have kind of small agents that do, a specific thing that are able to call on other agents that have access to various tools. So we're just at the beginning of this. I think it does change the world in terms of some of the more basic things, that we'll call them script kiddie attacks and that type of thing. I think AI is just going to do all that for people, and you're going to be able to prompt it and say, please go attack this company and figure everything out. And that's a bit scary. But I think the defenders have equal access to those sorts of things. And maybe the things where a human needs to respond, needs to think about something, needs to react very quickly, maybe that's a place where an AI agent can take some action there instead. But it's really interesting to see these DARPA funded efforts to just sort of figure that out, because we know our adversaries are doing the same thing. So it'd be nice if we can stay a step ahead there.
Just one follow-up question on that. Do you see a central place for companies like HP, Microsoft, and others in the development of the putative model priming that you're talking about? When, in other words, when you have a firmware that you're wanting to be processed in bug bounty, does HP have a central role in helping sort of jumpstart the process of producing those frameworks? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. Maybe we haven't done it yet. I'll say that much. I don't think we've thought about it all that much yet. But yeah, in terms of the goal of our bug bounty program is to find the bugs. And so if we can help enable that or accelerate that in some way, that's probably a good thing. So yeah, that's something to take into consideration.
Yeah.
It's going to cost me more, but
Yeah. Well, ROI.
Yeah.
Gina, I know you have a lot of really jawbreaker questions. So,
well, dovetailing into the AI talk, there's so much uncertainty in the world right now, especially with a lot of the geopolitical tensions we're seeing across, allies and whatever other allyships exist currently. Where do you see companies like HPE or the other big networking companies fitting in and slotting into this, as far as things like their influence with cybersecurity strategy, as far as setting the tone for how we're going to address these new threats, how we're going to posture America's networks against those threats?
Yeah, it's interesting. So HPE is a multinational company, of course. We exist in like 157 countries, or I probably have that number wrong, but at the root of it, we're still a US company. And I think if you look at the values that we probably all believe in, rule of law is one of those. And you can compete, but we compete on a particular playing field that ought to be fair for everybody to compete on. And not everybody thinks that way. And there are nations around the world where kind of, hey, get any advantage you can, and it doesn't matter if it's ethical or not ethical, and so forth. So I think that's the viewpoint that we kind of try to represent is, hey, fair game if you want to hack our products. Here's the outlines of the bug bounty program. If you want to report it to us, great, do that. We know that not everybody will. There's probably people holding 0-day HPE vulnerabilities out there right now today, maybe using them against us, and who knows. So the best we can do is to kind of go and try to incentivize people in the right way to work with us on that kind of stuff. And then likewise, there's a bunch of both national and international groups that kind of come together. The ISACs are one example in the U.S. That's primarily U.S. anyway. We participate in those sorts of things. So if we're seeing threat indicators, for our own systems, we share that with other people. We share it with governments. There's kind of a decent network built up now of people that kind of see the same way on these sorts of things. So I think that's a big deal. We as well, every quarter I go through my standards of business conduct training and learn all about the things that I'm not allowed to do, like bribery and side funds and just you name it. There's all the stuff that will get you written up in the news to be a bad corporate citizen. But that's kind of a global thing as well. We hold everybody to those same sets of business conduct standards around the world, and that gets into the cybersecurity realm as well. Example being, if I am out there poking around and I come across my competitor's price list and it's not supposed to be public information, I'll get fired if I bring that inside the company and start sharing it around, or proprietary details, or really anything that I'm not supposed to have. They'll kick me out pretty quickly if they find out that I'm using that to promote ourselves.
Interesting.
I don't know if that answered your question at all, but
it does. It does. The question that I find interesting, I'm taking a lot of policy classes right now for cybersecurity at Georgia Tech, and we've done a lot of investigation into the geopolitical nature of how you demonstrate your intentions to an adversary. So you've talked about working with a lot of these international institutions and things like that, and trying to project that influence. So that's an interesting takeaway from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you buy a server from us and you're running your business on that server, you ought to have a reasonable expectation that other people aren't breaking into your server and stealing your data or corrupting it or doing whatever. Like, leave people alone and let them run their businesses. And so, but there's today we see the cybersecurity world, the bad guys are not just like the DEF CON hackers anymore. It's organized crime now, and it's nation states, and the organized crime is trying to get money, and the nation states are trying to get influence, or all the things that nation states want over each other. And we're just at some point we're just a product vendor trying to let people buy IT products so that they can do whatever it is they do.
Yeah, it's a difficult proposition to try to remain Switzerland when you have warring parties all the way around you, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you guys are trying to provide a service, and I agree with Gene. Some of the standards that are being held that you're being held to take part in the international community while you're trying to build this product. In terms of how it is that we can, as cybersecurity professionals, right? So we're in the world. Our particular group does penetration testing, so we're simulating what threat actors do.
Yeah.
what are some of the ways that we can better understand the proper way to go about our business and the proper way to integrate with some of the standards that you're seeing internationally? Are there organizations that we can get involved with that are similar to what you're talking about, the sort of organizations that you're with? Are there things that security professionals can get involved with to understand and sort of be part of some of those high standard organizations that you just spoke about?
Yeah, well, the ISACs are I think the most obvious one, although that tends to focus more around indicators of compromise and those sorts of things, and sharing those sorts of indicators. But I would say, like, the common criteria community, and this gets into a little bit government specific, but I've dealt with U.S. federal government and other international governments for a long time. And common criteria was kind of an evaluation standard for how do we look at a product and say, is it fit for purpose for what I want to use it for, whether that's a VPN gateway or a firewall or a switch or something like that. And that's been opened up to kind of the community, so anybody can show up and participate in defining what those protection profiles are. In an example, we went through the requirements around things like firewall and VPN are fairly straightforward. We talked for a long time about, should we have something that we call core protections? So should we have a statement about things like backdoor administrator accounts? Should we have a statement about, do you have to compile with ASLR if you're like in a C language sort of thing? Stack canaries, should that be something that becomes mandatory for basic stopping stack smashing attack type things? And it's quite a debate. The vendors see the value in something like that, but then also say, man, I've got this 15-year-old product that I still have to support, and if I have to go back and touch all that, here's what it's going to do to us. And so there's quite a bit of debate that goes back and forth on that. I think there's still value in that group. What I've seen lately is a fragmentation of it. It's unfortunate, where a bunch of nations around the world are kind of spinning up their own standards around this. So the UK did it for a long time. They backed off. They came back with some more stuff. India is doing this now. It seems like every day I see a new nation that sort of puts up their own, you must be certified against this type of standard or else you can't import your products into our country. And the problem that common criteria was trying to solve was exactly this fragmentation of saying, I got to go through 27 different things. At some point, the company says, enough, we're not going to do any more of these things. And that's, we're getting to that point now. So that's one group that I think needs to be re-strengthened and reinvigorated a bit. And there's lots of, from a defensive controls perspective, that's a good place to focus. So kind of the ISACs get you on the offensive side, and the common criteria gets you on the defensive side. Those are the biggest ones, I would say. There are lobbyist groups out there that kind of want money from people like us that are vendors, and then they kind of keep an eye on public policy and who's doing what. And there's lots of good intentions in politics that then turn into, when the rubber hits the road, it's a horrible idea. And these lobbyists, people have a negative perception of lobbyists, but there's a positive side too of, can we stop the government from doing something that seems well-intentioned but is going to be really bad for a whole lot of people?
Yeah,
there's a lot of that's been taking place as well. But my biggest worry is just, you're probably hearing it, is the fragmented nature of how, even in the U.S., that we approach this from a 50-state perspective, a federal perspective, and then when we go outside the nation, it's just everybody wants something slightly different in a different way, and it gets expensive to do all of that.
Yeah, you're making my brain race, and that's one of the questions that I think is difficult in security as a whole, is someone coming up with a reasonable, meaningful, and coherent definition of due diligence.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that. It's very difficult to do that. So one of the things that we're doing in our group, so Inside Baseball, is, Gene is our policy guru. He's studying that at Georgia Tech, and he's trying to develop a set of security controls for our group. And of course, we're the penetration testing group, security auditing group, and as you could expect, we have a lot of edge cases and a whole lot of very odd things in our group. It makes it very difficult to come up with policy, extraordinarily difficult,
Yep.
right? And the technical controls we have to put into place are correspondingly going to be that difficult, right? Well, let me just ask you the really high level 30,000-foot philosophical question. Do you think that it's possible to find a meaningful and coherent definition of due diligence and security?
That's a tough one. And I'm just thinking in the narrow scoping of pen testing. I want to prove that my product is free of security vulnerabilities. It's really difficult to prove a negative like that.
Negative,
and then it turns into a proxy of, well, how many hours did you spend on it? Or what code paths did you exercise and how much did you exercise them? So you can go in all these different tangents, but it really becomes difficult to say, yeah, to your point, what is due diligence? Did you even look at it? Did you do a vulnerability scan? Okay, that probably doesn't meet the bar, but at least you've done something. If I hire a company like yours, that represents another level of it. But even there's such variability in people that do that type of work that it's tough. The bug bounty programs have tried to address a little bit of that. For example, one of them, they have a portal that everybody logs in through, and it'll track kind of how much effort did somebody put into it, what percent of code paths do we think have been exercised. And in the case of web applications, it's a little bit easier because you can see all the various URLs and endpoints that are being touched. In an embedded C product, it's a lot tougher because it's not externally visible as to what those code paths are. But that's one way to try to get at it. But it only works for certain types of applications, I think. So that's a good question. I don't have a good answer for it, but I certainly recognize the problem.
Yeah, it's very difficult in my experience.
Yeah, so many of these
I
policy.
have no answer.
Yeah, so many of these policy frameworks are so rigid. They're black and white, and they don't leave a whole lot of room for nuance as far as things like meeting your due diligence are concerned. So,
and you look at who's had data breaches this year. Every single one of them was probably ISO 27001 certified and had a PCI audit. And
that's one of the things we're shooting for, by the way. So, yeah.
But then you have the T breach where they just had data sitting out on the open. So, I mean,
that to me, that like the T breach is the joke is that it was vibe coded and all that sort of junk. But like that to me, it's almost like I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. Or what was it? I don't know art, but I know it when I see it. It's almost due diligence almost has the same definition, and it's like you said, it's context specific. But you can easily look at a T app and say, okay, they did not meet basic due diligence. It's obvious, right?
Yeah.
Because they literally just put everything out on the internet. But you have another application that another company that they got hacked because Sauron's eye was on it, right? It's a super hard question.
Yeah, and it gets into just should we make the assumption that every system is breakable if you apply enough effort to it and enough a determined enough attacker goes after it? Probably. And then to what level? I think of it kind of like safes, right? That safes get rated by how long it takes somebody to crack into a safe. And can you apply something like that to a cybersecurity system and say, this thing is resistant against a determined attacker for 2 hours, and then after that, all bets are off. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, I was about to say that is a very interesting way to look at that.
That's exactly what we tell everybody. Every time I get out and I start talking, giving my spiel, I always give the bear joke, right? That's the first thing I say is you don't have to be, if it's you and another guy in the woods, a bear shows up, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the other guy, right? So, and I've always made the argument that security is a game of economics. It always is, always will be. And it's always a matter of increasing your cost relative to your peers, right? Whatever valuable thing you have, you think of your peers that have something of equal value, equal quantitative and qualitative definition of value, right? You look at those peers. Are you more expensive than them? Then likely as not, you will not be attacked, and they will. Right. Over a long enough timeline. Right. So maybe that's what it is that this really this is a question of economics, and there's not necessarily going to be a deterministic definition of due diligence. It's just maybe it's just not possible.
Yeah, well, point, David, about and, I think John, you were talking about earlier. So many attackers nowadays are coming from organized crime, right? And for them, that is absolutely economics, right? Nation state. Let's just be honest. I mean, if they point their laser at you, well, good luck, right? It's like, but the other people, it's totally a game of economics. But go ahead, John. You were about to say something.
Don't remember anymore. So
got him. No.
I appreciate you're indulging our philosophy here, but it's something that we're in the work that we do. It's difficult, and I know.
Well, it's becoming more important with people wanting cyber insurance, and what does the premium for cyber insurance look like, and can you demonstrate that you've done the minimum, even the minimum necessary to protect yourself before you ask somebody else to offload risk to them in terms of insurance payouts and things like that. And then just the paperwork that I see these days that people want to go through when they want to use us as a software as a service provider, and the liability shifts that people want to take place. Obviously, they want guarantees that their data is not going to be accessed or lost or compromised in any way. And it's impossible to make those types of guarantees. But likewise, it's also difficult to say, well, how much effort did we go through to make sure that you're not doing that? And yeah, I think you have a good point there. It's presenting people with vuln scans, which ends up being the common thing that people want, or tell me all the known CVEs that are in your product. Oh, okay, well, that's not going to do any good. Right. But down to, did you have a PCI audit done? Okay, yeah, but that's a snapshot in time, and it's not an easily solved problem.
It seems like an incident response plan.
Oh, go ahead, Gene.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It seems that an incident response plan is becoming potentially even the more important thing than a lot of these controls are that we traditionally have seen, just because it's becoming more of a matter of if than or more of a matter of when than if.
It's when, yeah, exactly.
On that path, a lot of times when we talk to clients, that'll be something that I'll ask them in our initial discovery conversations is, if you had an incident happen right now and you got a call and, say all your file servers are crypto locked or something like that, who are the first three people you're going to call? And this will be the CIO we're talking to, and they're like, "Oh, that's a great question." And I'm like, "Well, we may need to talk more," because, to your point, Gene, if it, as in the matter of when versus if you don't have that incident response plan in place, or the ability to, go back and recover that data in a meaningful and intelligent and quick way and safe way. Now it's all about disrupting the business, right? And so there's a lot to be said for losing information. There's a lot to be said for PCI and things like that, and those things are going to be very costly. Branding loss is costly, but in the end, production is extremely costly as well, right? So how much downtime to these large corporations or organizations in the government? Some of those are, we've dealt with some guys where they're the governmental organizations. Gosh, there was one state where they had 30 counties go down that we knew, and they got, some of those counties were taken back to paper, right? Like they were back to paper, and they had no idea who was paying for water or had basic utilities and things. So it's pretty interesting how fragile some of those infrastructure pieces are as well. But yeah, it's definitely having that incident response plan, or going through tabletop exercises, we think is very important too. So
Definitely.
So one taking you back to the ZTNA question, do you see that as a real shift forward in security? Do you see that as a really good paradigm shift, to use a abused term? Do you see that as a good shift forward for the community? I'll just give you my opinion, and then you share yours. I personally see that as sort of wedded to the question of segmentation, which my byword talking to any client is that a good segmentation covereth a multitude of sins, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have things segmented well, you can have some really bad stuff in your environment, and it will be okay. And to me, the successor the successor to that is the ZTNA. So do you see that as sort of the future, and the best resting place for us going forward?
I think so. We're in kind of early stages of, people have adopted it for remote access a lot these days, right? And that, I think that was an outcome of the pandemic, when suddenly we had to shift very, very quickly. And the VPN concentrators, that was going to be buying new hardware and just too much. And so that was about the time that some of these ZTNA services were coming out there. And so people kind of picked that up and said, okay, this is a next generation VPN. The notion of using it all the time, I think, is a bit newer, and people are still kind of scratching their heads about, does this make sense? We've seen at least a few customers of ours that have effectively segmented user segments of the network off from data center. They've basically said, I've got IoT devices out there and they need to do their thing, whatever it is. And those tend to be very tightly controlled in the network. And we use, authentication and fingerprinting and all these sorts of notions of, do I let it talk to the internet? Do I let them talk to each other, et cetera? They largely don't talk to the users. And so user segments, historically, we've been doing authentication and Wi-Fi for a long time. Okay, identify the user, make sure that they're authenticated, that they're allowed to be here. And once they're on the network, now they're on the internal network, right? And they can get to all the internal resources. And you use routing to do that. My user subnet is routable to the data center in Houston, where half our applications live. I've seen a bunch of people now saying, we're gonna segment that, and we're not going to make it routable anymore. And you can't reach the data center applications unless you are coming through one of these ZTNA pathways. And so you're going to be authenticated through that. But then you're not on the network. You're not on a routable network to that thing. You're going through an application layer proxy to reach those types of services. And so now you think about the old OPM hack that happened, where somebody got into one segment of the network, and now they can use a jump box and they can directly talk to a bunch of database servers. ZTNA is a scheme that kind of makes that thing go away. You can only talk to the things that have been predefined as a pathway to be able to talk, and only through particular means of access. And so I think that is a paradigm that can make a lot of sense. Now the data center then becomes the perimeter. If it's an on-prem data center, if it's in the cloud, whatever, somebody gets into a segment where kind of database servers talk to front ends, it's still going to be kind of, now we're back to application layer security in those databases and stuff. So it doesn't fix everything, but I think you got so many people, and I'm thinking of my own organization, all these laptops, all these personal devices and so forth that are potentially exposed to resources that we care about. It just cuts down that attack surface so much by being able to do that. So that's why I'm positive about it. But there are simplistic views that say, well, just make everything, replace your network, get rid of your network entirely. You don't need it anymore. Use 5G, and everything goes through one of these ZTNA clouds. And that ignores the idea that we've got building sensors and security cameras and vending machines and all the stuff that you end up seeing on the network. And if you're in a retail environment, you've got stuff, digital signage, and there's all kinds of stuff that has to be dealt with. So we still have to handle that. And that doesn't necessarily plug neatly into a kind of a ZTNA type of approach. And that's why I say the network enforces security for the things and ZTNA enforces security for the users. That might be a paradigm that makes sense going forward. It's like I said, I think it's still early for that, but I think we're kind of excited about that and building products along to go along that route. One of the things that we said is, well, we don't think it should all live in the cloud. If all this ZTNA enforcement happens in the cloud, and I do have an on-prem data center, which a whole lot of people still have. Everybody thinks this is dead and it's all in the cloud. It's not. Do I want my traffic going out to the cloud, going through security enforcement, and then coming back in and using my internet bandwidth twice? And we said, well, what if we can put an enforcement node into an HPE server and drop it into a local environment? So now you get the client figures out where's my closest point of presence for enforcement. It might be the public cloud. It might be, bare metal as a service, depending on which city you're in. It might be something that sits in the local data center, but it's consistent policy across all of that. So if we can build that thing successfully and devil's in the details of that, then I think it has a chance at being seriously adopted.
It's definitely a shift in thinking, right? So much of the, HP has an Airheads article
Yep.
That talks about multicast name resolution, for example, which is that's a protocol. I mean, it's essentially a secondary DNS protocol. But one of the points made in that article is that the most correct solution to this functionally application layer problem is actually at the network, right? The best solution for it is at the network.
Yeah.
And so that ended up just that itself is a bit of a shift because if you talk to network engineers, they're going to have one idea. They tend to be builders as opposed to protectors, right? The only time they ever do any protection thinking is in the firewall, right? Otherwise, everything is about maximizing bandwidth, making sure the lights stay on, and so forth. But the network design actually is where the most correct solution lies. Even for our stuff, right? So us as penetration testers, when we get into a network and we can see everything, we already know we're going to get in, right? We already know that we're going to win, right? It's just a matter of time, right? But if we get into a network and we see segmentation, we know we're in for a bad day, right? And that's just basic segmentation, right? Just basic zones, firewalls, and so forth. But transitioning from that, having network people become more like security people, thinking more like security people. That to me would be a profound shift in how. It'd be a profound shift in the implementation of security. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we've been messaging. Rich came to our conference a couple of years ago and heard me say that on stage. I'm pretty sure that hey, if you're a network engineer today, you need to come together with security and either be a security engineer or you need to work very closely with those because it's so highly dependent. And I've never met a good security person that didn't also have a good understanding of networking. I think you just have to, you have to know how things like ARP work and silly little low level protocols, because that's where a lot of the stuff can go wrong. So we definitely agree with that. Our marketing kind of tries to back that up and say, security first networking is and it's the idea of security and networking coming together and so forth. But we'll see how it plays out. It does seem, I think you're right. It does seem to be different mindsets sometimes. And the network person says, hey, if I'm doing my job, I can route every packet to everywhere with the lowest latency possible and the highest reliability. And the security guy says, well, if I do my job, you won't get anything to go through.
Everything's air gapped.
Right. Scissors, the great security tool.
We
Yeah, that's
I just remember being it's a very, very large SEC university in the South. We were there and they were talking about it, and we had the at that time they had the CISO and the CIO there, and the CIO was talking about, just what you said. He's like, yeah, we're we got to make sure that we have low latency networking to all of our people and that they're on all the time. I think he had said something like always on or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just remember looking at the CISO and I'm like, so what are some of your goals? He's like, I just want to shut the network down, honestly, if I could. And we all just started laughing, but he was like, no, but really I'm serious. So I was like, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting, John. We had a guest on a couple months ago who and I'm wondering if this is going to be a shift, but he's actually at a SEC university and he's their CISO, but he is also in the entire networking and telecommunications rolls up to him. And I wonder if that's a shift we might see going forward, because when I first saw that, I'm like, man, that's kind of interesting. I didn't know anybody else who was doing that, but it's actually been a very, very cool thing to watch how that entire networking team that we'd worked with in the past is now they're all adopting, hey, they're trying to take security classes and get like some lower level, like, CompTIA, it's, Security Plus and things like that they never would have probably done before because there wasn't that focus. So, I like you we're interested in seeing that. So, I think that's kind of a neat shift, and I'm curious if that'll ever make it up to the corporate ranks or maybe some other large SEC schools. But yeah, it's worked out well for them.
Yeah, I've seen that in a few other places as well. A couple of them were schools, and then not very many in the corporate world. But
Yeah.
I think the point's valid. I think it can make sense. It all depends on how seriously an organization wants to treat security, and this is a common debate in the CISO community of, do I have a seat at the table? Does anybody care about me? Do I get the budget that I need, et cetera, et cetera? And it kind of all ties back to that. Do we view security as an annoyance that we just have to check the box? And that's one type of CISO that you'll get, versus we view this as a strategic competitive advantage to us to have good security. Then you get a different type. So, yeah, I could see those sorts of things happening.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I wanted to ask you kind of kind of pulling it back a little bit from the cybersecurity, but you've been doing this. You've been in IT for quite a while, like the rest of us. Well, maybe not Gene as long, but you're now in a leadership position. And I know going from doing engineering and things like that, and then becoming a leader, it's a big adjustment sometimes. I'd like to know, and if you're anything like me and Dr. Gwen and David, we've had good mentors. I was wondering if there's anything that a mentor of yours has, or any piece of wisdom that you've had, and you kind of internalize that as kind of foundational for the way you do things. And, what is that for others who are not just in cybersecurity, but in going into IT leadership? What do you see yourself preaching and kind of repeating to other people that you've taken on from maybe one of your old mentors?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people that have gone through Aruba would point to Dominic Orr as one of those people. He was the angel investor in Aruba, then was chairman of the board, then became the CEO, and was with us for a long time, all the way through the HP acquisition. But he'd have all these things he would say, and the one that probably persists the longest, he would say customer first, customer last, which kind of describes the culture of how we try to run Aruba. And now with Juniper coming in, Juniper seems to have a very similar type of mindset. So the cultures seemed quite compatible, which is helping. But it was really just recognition of where our money came from and what are we doing? Why are we here? It's not trying to build my own career. It's if I don't have happy customers, then and that's honestly, I can't remember names and faces. I go to our Atmosphere conference, and which is now HPE Discover, and all these people talk to me. And the thing that I take away is how many of them are happy with what we're doing and think we're doing good work, and how many of them are pissed off at us. And that's kind of my gauge of that whole customer first, customer last. Dominic had other things he would say. He would say, like, everybody can be momentarily stupid. I try to have a lot of grace with people because we work in a really complex world and a complex
Sure.
environment. And so we've had some really stupid security vulnerabilities in our products, for example. I don't blame people for stuff like that. I say, okay, it happened. We have to fix it. We have to hopefully try to, put things in place so that these don't happen again. But I'm not pointing to any individual and saying you're a moron for causing this to happen. I might think it internally, but no, I don't really, because I know how complicated some of these systems are that we've built, and it's
Right.
easy to let something happen that shouldn't happen, and they even some of them think they've done what's needed. So we say that. He also used to talk about brutal intellectual honesty, and I think a lot of people have misunderstood it and kind of abused it and said you should be mean to people. That's not it. But I try not to sort of believe the marketing hype, if you want to call it that, of how great we are or whatever. Let's deal with each other on a reality basis, and not how hard did you work on something. Yes, you did, but it was the wrong thing to work on, and so forth. So just trying to be straightforward with people. I think my organization is so much easier to deal with if we operate under those types of principles, rather than kind of people posturing and making excuses and blaming other people and so forth. It's just like, hey, we're all here to do kind of probably a difficult job. Let's do the best we can with that, but be straightforward about stuff and genuine. So those are some of the ones that I think have lasted in the culture here that I've just picked up along the way. I haven't had a lot of kind of explicit mentors before. That I've just had people that I've interacted with a lot that I've picked up things from, both on the good and the bad side. I've had a lot of bad managers, or seen a lot of bad managers in the past, and I've tried to learn, like, okay, what made them a bad manager? Okay, I should not do that.
You learn what not to do.
Yeah, and so I don't know if I'm any good, but at it, I tell people I'm the CTO now. I'm not the chief technologist. I sign the expense reports for a whole bunch of chief technologists. So yeah, I have my ability. DEF CON is the reason, like, that I know I can still configure a network, because I have to do it once a year, but otherwise I'm not very good at it anymore.
We always joke. Well, my engineers, they joke with me anytime I'm like, hey, I want to help do something. They're like, no, just go away, boss. You just please. So it's just you're gonna break something. So. Well, I appreciate, I know this is a lot of time during the day and you're very busy, but we really love having you on. I would like to ask one more question, since it is our cybersecurity episode, one of our cybersecurity episodes. And it's kind of funny because my daughter, she is in computer science now, and I think she's wanting to go into to cybersecurity. And she got to do an internship with Dr. Gwen this summer, so that was a lot of fun. But it was fun to watch her. She started. She was just sitting down and talking and just gushing about everything she's learning. And I'm like, of course, I'm trying not to be too proud and excited. I'm like, finally, one of them wanted to go down that path, And so, she started listening to some cybersecurity podcast and just talking about, like, just some of the historical hacks and things like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know. Yeah. And started speaking that language, and, kind of talking about, WannaCry and stuff and like that. She's like, did you know? I'm like, yeah, I remember when that happened, So I was going to ask you, what is to you one of the scariest hacks that you've seen in either recently or just historically, and if you have any good stories about having to deal with one of those?
I haven't had to deal with a whole lot of them. I'll say that I've been fortunate that
Knock on a lot of wood, John.
yeah, a lot. I'm going to say the one that I'm most impressed by, and that was Stuxnet. I really just think that was a killer piece of work. Whoever did it, and we can all have our suspicions about who that was, and they made a movie about it, so it was kind of cool. Just combining kind of 4 0 days together into one thing, and they got a code signing certificate from somebody else that they used to sign a driver, and they did the number of things that had to be chained together and then to work properly in an air-gapped environment. And how did you get the exploit to the target that you were trying to get to? Just the whole thing, I think, was just a master class in probably something I don't want used against me, but I part of going to DEF CON is you're like, oh crap, when you hear somebody giving a talk and like, now I got something I got to worry about. But at the same time, I can recognize kind of genius in what they've done and just say, that was really cool. It just sucks for me as a defender to go have to deal with the consequences. But I say that about Stuxnet. I just think that was one of the most impressive sort of operations I've seen.
Yeah, I was going to say the OPM hack because I had my SF-86 slurped up by that. So no, that was definitely the worst for me.
Yeah. At this point, my data has been stolen so many times. I almost don't. It's like if you're going to give credit to somebody on the basis of them saying they're me, that's your problem. Have
yeah,
fun.
Right. I know, right?
Well, I appreciate the time, John. Gene, David, do you have any other questions you wanted to ask? And John, do you have any questions for us?
Well, John, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really, really good talk.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about stuff. We should do it over beers next time and record that.
Oh, well, if you watch some of our old episodes, excuse me, we did. You were talking to the CIO of Ergon, I think it was, their oil gas company out of Jackson, Mississippi, and we had their CIO on, and we did a virtual bourbon blind tasting while we did our interview. So next time we do it, if you want to do that, just let us know. So that's pretty fun.
Absolutely.
But again,
it's progressively better as it goes along.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. But yeah,
we get so honest at the end. It's crazy.
In vino veritas.
But yeah, it's been fun to be able to talk to some smart people and just get some good insight and some fun stories. So we appreciate this. And hopefully we'd love to have you on again, and hopefully maybe we can hang out at definitely see you in Vegas for Discover, but hopefully next year we can all make it out to DEF CON. So
yeah,
we'll
perfect. So, all right.
I appreciate the time, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the NSI podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share the episode. Got questions or topics you want us to cover? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. For more information, visit us at nextstepinnovation.com.